My name's Peter Ransom, and I used to own the goat here at Sutler Lane. While I was living here, I had some strange experiences. One night I'd gone to bed and suddenly I was woken by a very intense cold. And as I gradually came to, I saw this ghostly, ghoulish head at the end of my bed. Just a skull, which was extremely frightening. After about 10 or 12 seconds, this apparition disappeared and the room warmed up again, which is more than I did for some moments. Another time I was playing my guitar in the flat upstairs, and I put the guitar down in an armchair to go and get a drink, and when I came back about 2 minutes later, the guitar had moved to the sofa on the other side of the room. I thought maybe one of my children had played with it and moved it across, but there was no one else in the flat at the time. I was on my own. This started me to think about ghouls and ghosts and whether anyone else in St Albans had had any experiences. So let's go and see if we can find anyone else who has some stories to tell.
If you think you have a ghost, where on earth would you go to find out more about it? First port of call on my ghost hunt is Hertfordshire Archives and Local Studies in Hertford. Here I can look up the history of my house and see if I can find any clues as to why it might be haunted. I can also research the local area to find out what other ghosts have been reported.
Well, now to go and see a man about a ghost. This is where St Albans began in the 3rd century, when Alban, the first Christian martyr, was beheaded around this spot by the Romans, and this magnificent building was built in his memory in the 8th century. There are many spooky tales associated with this ancient building from its long history, including various ghostly monks and spectral singing when the cathedral has been empty. On Christmas Eve 1944, a fire watcher on duty throughout the night was suddenly disturbed by the sound of bells ringing when no hands tugged the ropes. A candle lit by itself, and the figure of a cowled monk wisped in and out of the shadows. But the most frightening of all was when the great organ began to play, its keys being depressed by unseen hands, and the sheet music slowly turned while the seat remained empty. And if that wasn't enough, a ghostly choir piped up to accompany the music.
Rumour has it that on the site of this old cottage once stood the charnel house of the abbey, where the bodies of deceased monks were laid in preparation for burial. In 1903, Francis Skeet, future stained glass window artist for the abbey, moved here as a child with his family. He tells us that one night, as their nanny was taking the children up to bed, she felt herself pinned against the wall by an unseen presence, and the candle she was holding was blown out. In the darkness she began to make out the form of a cowled figure who spoke to her in Latin before vanishing, leaving her alone in the darkness. Many times this figure was seen. It was gaunt and pallid and dressed in a monk's black habit, with a hood pulled up and a metal medal around his neck. So regular and frightening were the manifestations that an exorcism had to be performed. The White Hart Tap public house was once where the coachman would stay, having dropped off the paying guests at the White Hart Inn just across the road, and where the horses would be watered.
Right, my name's John. I used to work as a barman at the White Hart Hotel between December 99 and April 2000. And during that time, towards the end, a couple of stranger things started to happen. Firstly, one morning, around about 10:30, 11:15, I was stocking up the bottles that are kept below the bar. As I looked up, I saw a figure sort of walking across the bar, which obviously was odd because there should have been nobody there, but I didn't pay any attention, just didn't think about it. Looked down to continue. I looked up again, sort of doing a double take, and noticed it walking through, disappearing into even the wall. Obviously I thought it was pretty strange. So I went and told the other bar staff, and the manager at the time, Evie, mentioned that she'd seen similar things and heard people discuss that. The second occasion was one Thursday night, I think it was a Thursday night, around about 9:30, when suddenly the Tetleys went off, the barrel ended, and this was surprising, to say the least, because we just put a fresh barrel on. So I went down into the cellar to investigate what had happened, and I found a barrel had been taken off the rack on which it was put upside down in the middle of the floor. Now, not only would this take a normal man's strength to lift a full barrel of ale, but also the tap was facing upwards, so that the ale flow was obviously cut off, and to do this without twisting the tap out would have required, well, dexterity I suppose, and ability to put it exactly the way you wanted it. The barrel wasn't even rocking, so it looked like it had been moved in one smooth movement. And there was another barman working with me that night. He was an upright northern lad, and he wouldn't have done practical jokes. He came down into the cellar with me, and he felt this weird cold, and he then refused to go down the cellar again. I think we finally coaxed him down 2 or 3 days later, but that was with effort. And then after that was all I witnessed, but there was also reports of chambermaids noticing beds appear to have been laid on not long after they'd made them. And similar things like that. A lot of guests would report, particularly in the bedroom 7, and bedroom 8 as well, just weird feelings, weird sensations, but nobody reported anything being disturbed. The chef used to report things being moved about, but I didn't really pay much attention to that because a lot of people used the kitchen, and he was an interesting character, I think, to say the least.
In 1820, the unfortunate Elizabeth Wilson was seated atop of the Northampton stagecoach, but she failed to duck her head as it pelted under the archway of the White Hart. She lost her head and her life, and it is her ghost that is said to trouble the building. Her ghost has often been seen gliding across room 8 and through the eerie passageways in this rambling old coaching inn.
I haven't actually seen anything, but I've felt the presence many times of ghosts here. One particular time we was setting up for a champagne breakfast, and I stood back to check that everything was out, glasses, etc. And Vicky was helping me at the time, and she disappeared into the kitchen to go and get something. Anyway, I've turned around to speak to her, knowing that she's come back through the swing door from the kitchen, and it wasn't Vicky, it was the ghost. I didn't actually see anything, I just felt the presence of this ghost. You know, when somebody like yourself is standing beside you. Another particular time, I was staying in room 8, and we had, I was sharing the room with Beth, who works here as well, and she said she felt a funny presence, and I had this, I was all tucked up in my duvet, but I felt this very cold feeling behind me. So I was like, oh, you know, tired, forget it, go to sleep. So I turned over, and the same again, freezing cold at the back of my neck. And Beth said she felt like hot and cold, which there was definitely something in that room last night. And many times, like, we've had to go up if we've been short-staffed, and we've had to go up and help, do the rooms and what have you. I've looked across into the conference room, knowing that somebody was there, and you've looked, and of course there's nobody there. So it must just be the ghost. We had an experience Diane, the new manageress. We had the draymen deliver on a Thursday morning early, and there's only one way down to the cellar. Anyway, she went to open the door was absolutely closed tight, couldn't get in there, and there's only one way. We never have had a key to lock it, but obviously it's closed for fire precautions. Anyway, she said literally kick the door open to get in there. Another time, this lady in this wheelchair was coming through the back of the restaurant. She was, you know, arriving for a meal, sit-down meal. And I was waiting, I didn't want to be rude, so I thought, well, nip back into reception. And as I'm walking through, this gust of cold air just went straight past me. Before he left, there was a gentleman staying in room 8, and there was this message writ on the mirror, and it said, meet me in room 7 at 8:30. So the guy's come down and told Evie, she's gone up there to have a look, and there it was in very fine pencil, like an eyeliner pencil. So she's rubbed it out. Anyway, he's come back down an hour or so later, and he said, it's on my mirror again. Another experience we had, there was this couple that was stopping, and she was heavily pregnant. They thought they'd have a little break before their baby came along. And she said in the middle of the night, the fire, was alight. She could see the flames and everything, and yet the fire has been blocked in for goodness knows how many years.
Fishbowl Street can be traced back to before the arrival of William the Conqueror. It was once on the main coaching route into the city and had about 72 coaches a day passing up and down it. Today it might seem like a quiet backwater, but it's really quite a busy place, peopled with spectres who go about their business after dark.
One house is said to have a friendly lady ghost, and its neighbour boasts a spectral woman who was supposedly strangled in one of the bedrooms. And more than one owner has woken in the night, panic-stricken at the feeling of invisible hands around their throat.
The best known is a woman in a long blue dress who has been seen in a house here as well as in the street outside in the early hours of the morning. She has been described as giving off an air of suffering and wipes her face with a handkerchief. This is thought to be a ghost of a woman who had lived in the house near the Red Lion Inn and had accidentally smothered her baby in the 18th century. The Tudor Tavern is a fine timbered frame structure and has provided food and drink for weary travellers for more than 600 years. Many stories of ghostly activity have filtered down through the years. A shadow follows the staff around when they are cleaning up in the late evening, and one has even been chased out of the building by its ghostly inhabitant. Some say the spirit is that of a previous tenant or a guest. Others, it's the spirit of a soldier brought in to die during the First Battle of the War of the Roses, when the soldiers marched up George Street to enter the town. The poltergeist experienced here is affectionately named Harry, who has moved plates and glasses but also switches the lights on and off. A few years ago, the manageress at the time saw Harry in some detail. He was sitting at a table, leaning on one elbow with a glass jug in the other hand. He had dark curly hair and a beard and was dressed in a black tunic with buttons on the cuffs and a ruffle around his neck.
But the Tudor Tavern isn't the only building in the street to boast a ghost. I met Paul Rolfe, who told me this interesting story.
Around about sort of, say, 3 or 4 o'clock one afternoon, I was in the flat. I came out of my bedroom and I was walking down the corridor, and as I walked down the corridor, I sort of like had this sort of feeling to look round, and as I looked round, I saw this woman disappearing down the end of the corridor. She was dressed in something like a Victorian lace dress, and she was floating around about sort of 2 feet off the ground. And as I looked at her, for probably seemed about 5 or 6 seconds, she floated away from me and disappeared down through the door at the end of the corridor into the room beyond that, which was very strange. Another thing that we experienced, not just myself but other flatmates, was we often were woken up at about 3 or 4 in the morning with the taps in the kitchen, which was just opposite my bedroom, on full, and there was nobody around at that time of night. So unless there was some sort of like prankster in the place, which I'm sure there wasn't, it must have been something bordering on the supernatural.
This is one of the oldest buildings in the High Street and was formerly part of Fisk's department store. The ghost of a grey lady has been seen here, mostly in the basement, and in the past staff have complained of goods being thrown about in the night, and nearby shops have reported a monk being seen in the cellar. The grey lady is thought to have been a corset maker and the manager's daughter who fell in love with one of the young storemen. Her father, who was disappointed in her choice of lover, kept her locked in her room, and she became so unhappy she took her life. After she died, a show table of wedding veils was often found upset, and it was thought the ghost was to blame, for she hated the thought of anyone else getting married.
This very French area of the city got its name from when St Albans was occupied by French soldiers in the 13th century. When King John of France was captured, he was kept for a few days in a private house, which later became the Fleur de Lis. Reputedly, the ghost of a young girl, known to the bar staff as Missy, has frequently been seen by the bar cellar hatch. Apparently, she was a barmaid at the Fleur and became pregnant by the landlord and fell mysteriously to her death down the cellar steps. Here the jukebox springs into life by itself, and the fruit machines are always playing up, and lights mysteriously switch on and off by themselves. So, it seems like I'm not the only one to experience strange happenings in my pub. In fact, pubs seem to have an abundance of ghostly goings-on. Here's Marion Powell, barmaid at the Hare and Hounds, who told me something very strange indeed.
There's two really that come to mind. The first one being, we'd just be serving behind the bar and one of the doors would come open, and for the time it took for someone to walk across the pub, the other door opened and shut as well. It was like someone came in one door, walked across and walked out the other. And it was Thursday morning and arrived for work, it's about 9:30 in the morning. Opened up the cellar door as normal, walked down the steps, but as I was walking down the steps I was aware that something was just not quite right. It was just like a dark force, like totally malevolent. As I walked down the stairs it started just shouting at me. It was saying, what was I doing there? And it just kept repeating, what are you doing here? And I just, just turned around and fled up the stairs again. I was screaming. I've never been so frightened in my life. In the corner, like a great darkness just coming at me. It was just enveloping the whole of the walls and chasing me up the stairs. The darkness was just coming towards me. But several days later, it started to flood. The green oozing, I don't know what to describe it as. It smelled terrible, dampness coming through the walls, and it was, it started flooding with water. Oh yes, there's a little shed sort of adjacent from the pub, and it used to be a hanging house. Whether or not that building used to be the hanging house or whether the cellar used to be the hanging house, not entirely sure. But what we think is that people were hung, the bodies were cut down, they rolled into a trench or a pit, which is now the sewers, or leads next to the sewers, which run next to this cellar.
Mallinson House, formerly known as Donington House, is now the head office of the National Pharmaceutical Association. The ghost here has been seen since 1872 and is a figure in white, with a hat or a wig and a silver button tunic, which appears at an upper window of the house and is believed to be that of a butler who committed suicide after being caught drinking his master's brandy. His master was Dr. William Russell, surgeon. This striking Tudor building stands on the corner of a road that was once the main coaching route to London. In its heyday, in the 16th century, this was a spectacular galleried Tudor inn and stood amidst an unbroken line of inns climbing the hill into the town. But when it was shut down in 1959, it had declined into a common lodging house. The original Tudor gallery was later discovered, embodied into a newer wall, its timber still intact. The design revealed a series of small lodgings, each with a separate door. Tudor graffiti was found scratched into a stone above the fireplace, together with merchants' marks, gallows symbols and people's names. According to accounts of people who have worked here over the years, there have been quite a few odd happenings. The ghost of a cavalier has been seen sitting by a fireplace, smoking a pipe, but more often than not, it is the distinct smell of his tobacco that has been sensed, moving through the building like a column of smoke. There is no smoking policy here, so when the smell is sensed, it's very obvious.
I'm Leo Hickish. I'm a partner with Strutton Parker, who are land agents and estate agents in St Albans. We've been in Crispin House for 14 years now. So this was approximately 4 or 5 years ago. One of my assistants was working here fairly early in the morning before anybody else had arrived. Came into the office and found some bare footprints coming down the flagstone steps here. She was the first person in. There's no reason on earth why anybody else would have been here, certainly not in bare feet. the fireplace here was really the connection between the Cavalier, who we gather has been noted here for some time, and our own experience was from fairly early days when we started here in the office about 14 years ago. On several occasions, a column of smoke, or a smell really, was identified. Tobacco smoke, it certainly wasn't a modern cigarette. It used to drift around the room. You could literally walk into the column and walk out of it again and track it across the room. And that, we haven't had that for the last couple of years, but it was pretty regular for at least sort of 8 or 9 years. This was about 2 or 3 years ago, where one colleague was in the room on the left-hand side and saw the head of a girl appear through the window, and that was basically the first time we'd come across that as one of the ghosts in the building.
When filming took place this video in the building, a camera battery pack physically switched itself off. As the crew were leaving, they turned off the lights and went out the door. But one of the team forgot something and came back, only to find the lights all blazing again. In a building with such a long history, you would expect there to be some shades of the past loitering here. I joined clairvoyant Marion Goodfellow and a team of ghost investigators to see what they could discover.
There's a cellar, Ross.
Yeah, no, see there's a crossover.
Yeah, there's a cellar down there, and I really wanted an entry and exit point, and having never been, I knew it was somewhere there, and we'd rather... Can you get down there?
Yeah, we go down there?
Yes.
Is it possible to go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, you can feel it immediately. The energy changes, not just the darkness and the fustiness. It's the heartbeat going, the energy. There's lots and lots of, you know, false lighting, but you can feel an undercurrent, can't you? And underneath. I should think there's been experiences on the stairs, actually.
I've got tingling in my fingers, but it might be,
Yeah.
might be the cold air.
No, I don't think so.
Give me hot hands.
I'm quite breathless, and I think more out there than actually in this room, but definitely there's a traffic point. Yeah. These are new timbers there, so this wouldn't be here.
Picking up any occupants.
I'm very nervous. That might be there's lots of electrical things, lots of noise. We were talking about noise before. I just think people have been frightened down here. They don't like being down here, and I'm picking up that clairaudiently, yeah. I've got a gentleman. Very hidey, very shy, very... don't know. I think he's over in there, that corner, rather than in that cupboard. Yeah, he's going, getting all steamed up. I've got a gentleman. Not very tall. 5'3", 5'4", little stocky chap. He's got a white apron, a bit like a butcher. I don't know if you're feeling anything.
I sense something over there,
But I mean, I don't know, they might have worn white aprons, you know, in here anyway, but it's a bit like a big wrapped round white apron. And I feel he's over there. I feel he's more over there than in that room, but he's all around us. Just generally just...
What, like a butcher's apron or something?
Yeah, a big white pinny, you know, that's sort of wrapped right the way round. He's not a buxom chap, but he's well made.
Sure,
he's
well
short,
built,
stocky.
short, stocky.
He's got legs that are, wouldn't
Rugby
stop
player.
a bulldog. He's very shy. He's comfortable here rather than upstairs. He's more comfortable down here. So I wouldn't have thought he would have been in the general public's view. His domain was definitely down here. Let's go down here and have a look. exciting. What a lovely place. Going towards the loo again, Graham. No, it's just lots and lots of activity. Can you feel it? Yeah, that's okay. Feeling sick and dizzy, yeah. Just as we came through. Yeah, just as we came through. I don't know, it's sort of busy, somebody that would have run up and down here a lot, you know, got really, really agitated, excited.
Right.
It's not a child. I just don't know what it is I'm picking up. We've got a gentleman down in the basement.
Right.
Which I think people don't feel comfortable down there. Maybe even have heard, felt something, you know, sort of somebody perhaps called their name. You know, just feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I'm getting a heart condition here. My heart's started racing downstairs with this busy little body running around. I've got a gentleman in here and I'm gasping for breath.
Sorry.
This gentleman passed, I feel, in this room. Can you not feel it?
I feel a bit dizzy.
Yeah. He's altering my breathing. He's so close to me. Feel my goosebumps.
Do you feel anything around here?
I feel a lot on the stairs. I know these are new stairs, but I feel it's very, when you come into a building like that, I'm being bombarded by different thoughts and feelings, do you understand? So, and I'm trying to pick up the psychometry of the building rather than the spirit. Everybody has spirit attached to them, and I'm trying to wheedle my way through. I should think there's been lots of incidences in the building itself. Stairways, walkways tend to be frequented by spirit ghosts, and I'm in no doubt that you get quite a lot of paranormal activity here.
In AD 61, Queen Boudica rampaged through the ancient Roman city with her armies, slaughtering the inhabitants and burning the city to the ground. It is said that a layer of ash can still be found deep underground today where the city was razed. Ghostly Roman soldiers have often been seen here. A young lad on his way home on his bike one Christmas was startled when he heard the sound of marching feet and saw a Roman centurion on a charger. He fell off his bike and was injured and ended up in the local hospital. More recently, local character Ginger Mills would often go for walks around the lakeside in the early hours of the morning and occasionally heard the same marching feet and felt a sudden rush of chill wind, as if something big passed him by. I met with Frank Lebar, an old resident of the city. Frank saw something very strange through the bedroom window of his modern flat. It just goes to show that not all ghosts can be found in creepy old houses.
I was in my bedroom. My bed was up against the wall, and there was a window near the bed leading out, and I suddenly, it wasn't a dream, I was suddenly aware of a crunching going on outside the bedroom window, and there were helmets going past. I could just see the tops of the helmets, and the crunching was most peculiar because it is grass outside the bedroom window now, but it must have been in those days pebbles and things like that, and that really scared me very much. To go into the bedroom, and you have to pass through the hall, and in the corner between there's a big cupboard, and the bathroom door, I saw a man standing in a greeny yellowish suit, and he was fair hair, and I mean, there was nobody there. I mean, it was definitely some form of ghostly creature.
My name's Laurel Bennett. My husband Ben and I have been in the pub for 6 years. I worked in the health service before. He had some experience of the licensed trade, but the reason we came here is because we knew our predecessors, and in fact they were here for 2 years and had told us about the ghost that was in the pub when they first arrived and described experiences. Of course, that didn't really mean much to us at the time because we had no idea that we'd end up being here. So when we did arrive and found that there were strange things happening, they were at pains to assure us that there wasn't a ghost at all, but had evidently forgotten what they'd said 2 years before. The story, as we've heard it, is rather pedestrian, I have to admit, that of a young girl who either lived or worked here, or perhaps both, who became pregnant by the landlord, and then was so ashamed that she hanged herself. We have no idea when this might have taken place. Very shortly after we first came, the door just locked. Ben came to go into the cellar and it just would not open. Now, it hasn't got any sort of lock that works as far as we know, but it was stuck fast and no amount of effort by loads of men to try and open it would help at all. So in the end, Ben went out to get the axe because there was no other way. We couldn't get it off the hinges or anything. Good job we didn't ruin a really old door, and came up to the door and leant on it and it swung open. So, and you know, afterwards everyone said, oh yes, well, you know, the hinge must have dropped or something, but that was actually really quite strange. This is the part of the story that I was telling you about where we came to the conclusion that there could probably be 2 spirits here, and that one of them is definitely the person that seems to have a male person that has some activity around about this area and in the cellar. And one night we had a pool match. I was behind the bar. It was very crowded, and it so happened that the visiting team had a number of quite young boys with them who were standing, and I could see them standing here from where I was looking across the bar through the people playing pool. And it was in the middle of the match, and I suddenly saw that. I couldn't see anyone doing it, but I could see it go. And I thought, oh, those bloody kids, I'm really going to tell that team next time they come not to bring them, because, you know, everyone was all like quiet and doing their shots and everything. And after the match, these 2 boys came rushing up to the bar and they said, oh, there's a ghost in here, there's a ghost in here. We were standing there and everything started flying off the ledge, and what is it? And their father saying, oh, it's all right, it's all right. And I just said, oh, everything's wonky in this pub, you know, that ledge isn't level. You might have just leant on it and probably it just fell off. But it didn't fall. Because they said to me it didn't fall, it just leaped, you know. We found out subsequently that, in fact, from the daughter of one of the several ago landlords, that this was the room where Abigail was believed to have killed herself. But the only other thing that's happened here to us is that we had a mirror that we bought from our flat in Finchley, which was a rather an acquired taste, you might say. It was in pink and blue glass. There was nowhere to put it here, so it was just leaning against the wall, but it was quite secure because it was only a light thing. And one day that just broke. We heard a bang and it had just broken into loads of pieces. And when I was talking to this woman later, she said that, and I said, what was her manifestation supposed to be of Abigail? And she said, well, the one thing was, because she was a cleaner, she didn't like anything that was bad taste, and she would, if you had things that she didn't think were of the right sort of quality, she would damage them.
Salisbury Hall is a 16th century moated manor house which occupies a site that has been inhabited since Roman times. King Charles II secretly purchased the house for his famous mistress, Nell Gwynn. The house has also played host to Sir Winston Churchill. During the Second World War, housed the secret activity of the de Havilland Aircraft Company, where the first ever mosquito plane was built. In the late 1960s, a top British clairvoyant stayed at the hall and discovered at least 2 spirits, one of which was believed to be Nell herself. Beneath the black and white floor in the hall, there is a Tudor floor of bricks, and beneath that is an even older floor of stones. Dig deep and ye shall find, so they say. And former owner Mr. Goldsmith did just that, and came up with a wealth of treasures, including human bones in the cellar. In the late 1950s, the hall was neglected and forgotten when it was discovered by the Goldsmiths, who lovingly restored it and opened it to the public. Mr. Goldsmith heard happy, girlish laughter echoing down an empty passageway. His wife heard footsteps in the passageway in the early morning when no one else was around. Other occupants in the past have also reported the sound of ghostly footsteps pacing up and down in the part of the house near the Tudor wing, which was destroyed in 1818. During the Civil War, Salisbury Hall was used by King Charles I as headquarters and an armoury, and some believe the footsteps are those of a cavalier who committed suicide in the house after fleeing the Roundheads. His ghost has also materialised, complete with swords sticking through him, in one of the bedrooms. The bedroom above the entranceway is also said to be haunted. Over the years, children staying in the room have been disturbed in the night by something standing over their beds. The ghost of Nell has been seen both on the staircase and in the panelled hall by, amongst others, Sir Winston Churchill's stepfather, George Cornwallis West, and she was also seen near the Green Bedroom. Apparently a room on the top floor has an inexplicable bloodstain that appears and disappears on the wall. The old house is a fascinating old place with rooms hidden behind sliding panels and secret passageways. In the top story of the house there is said to be a priest's hole, where a hunted fugitive could be hidden and fed, and it is believed that a suicide took place here. Nell Gwyn's cottage was once in a derelict state, but it's now restored to its former glory. This doesn't disguise the fact that ghosts of the past still linger here. It is from this window that Nell reputedly dangled a newborn baby, threatening to drop him into the moat unless he was given a title. King Charles II hastily stepped in, saying, "Nellie, spare the first Duke of St Albans." A little boy in coaching uniform has been seen in the cottage, and on the bridge just outside, the presence is felt. This is believed to be that of a messenger who pelted up the driveway on horseback during the War of the Roses. So furious was his journey that his unfortunate horse expired underneath him as they reached the bridge. Often the sound of horses' hooves have been heard on the bridge when no horse is there. In the cottage itself there have been some very odd poltergeist activities.
We'd lived in the cottage, and at that time the end part of the cottage was a small antique shop, and the owner had definitely had poltergeist type experiences, because he had a framed picture which they kept finding on the floor. He'd come up to open the shop Saturday morning, and he'd find it in 3 or 4 parts on the floor. So he'd reassemble it, and then the next week it would happen again.
Well, it seems that there are a lot of people who have had ghostly experiences in this city, but I'm not quite convinced. Are you?